Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 419. I'm the host, Kyle Anzalone. A lot of news to talk about on today's show, but first I just want to remind people that they can share the show. It's hosted at the Libertarian Institute. You can find the show on the blog at antiwar.com, and right now at antiwar.com, we are holding our spring fundraiser. So if you head on over to the site, you can make a donation. We're getting pretty close to our goal. We just need a little bit more help. And right now, your donations will be doubled because we have matching funds. So even if it's a small, amount, $5, $10, head on over, help us out, help us at our fundraising goal, and we could continue to put out great content. And then you can also find the show YouTube, Rumble, and Odysee for the video version, and it's up anywhere you can listen to podcasts. And with that, let's get into the news today. Starting with Assange news again, and I think it's a generally good thing that we have been talking about the show, Assange on the show so much, that there's been so much to discuss with his case, because, in a lot of ways, his case has been in this legal limbo situation for a couple of years now where, they're going through appeals in the British court system, which, even myself, I don't fully understand exactly, where all the appeals, how many appeals he has. It's a little bit different than, the American court system. And so that's a part of this, and that, we're getting more news coming out, and a lot of this is generated by the Assange camp. His father and his brother are working really hard going on. I think it was like a 40-city tour to show this documentary, Ithaca, and, explain Julian Assange's case to more and more people. And so not only is that happening in the U.S. and in other countries, but it looks like Australia, which is Assange is an Australian citizen. That's, where he's from, is very interested in, not very, very interested, but somewhat interested in pushing this issue with the U.S. So this from Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com, May 9th. Australian lawmakers urge U.S. to drop case against Assange. A cross-party group of Australian members of parliament met with the U.S. ambassador to Australia on Tuesday and called for Washington to drop the charges against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, an Australian citizen. The delegation of lawmakers, known as the Bring Julian Assange Home Parliamentary Group, told U.S. Ambassador Carolyn Kennedy that there was broad support for Assange in the Australian Parliament. Independent Member of Parliament Andrew Wilkie said in a statement that lawmakers impress upon the ambassador the broad support in the Australian Parliament for Mr. Assange, which has echoed clearly both by the Prime Minister and the opposition leader last week when they said this matter had gone on long enough. And we had talked about that on the show. The Australian PM, Anthony Albanese, said last week that he was frustrated by the administration's continued effort to extradite Assange. If he is convicted in the U.S., Assange faces up to 105 years and 75 years in prison for publishing information related to the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The conviction would set a dangerous precedent for press freedom in the United States and around the world, as Assange is not an American citizen. The Biden administration has come under more pressure to drop the charges against Assange, who is being held in London's Belmarsh prison since April 2019, when the Trump administration's Justice Department unsealed the indictment against him. More world leaders have been speaking out for Assange, including Brazil's President Lula da Silva. It is an embarrassment that a journalist who denounced trickery by one state against another is arrested, condemned to die in jail, and we do nothing to free him. It's a crazy thing, he said. Lula went on to say, we talk about freedom of expression. The guy is in prison because he denounced wrongdoing, and the press doesn't do anything in defense of this journalist. I can't understand it. Ambassador Kennedy is the last surviving child of President John F. Kennedy, and her cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., recently launched a presidential bid and has said he would pardon Assange if elected. RFK Jr. wrote on Twitter, instead of championing free speech, the U.S. actively prosecutes journalists and whistleblowers. I'll pardon brave truth tellers like Julian Assange and investigate the corruption and crimes they expose. So, that's good to hear. And again, more political momentum building in support of Assange is always a great thing. Next up, a very close call, and this is just the exact reason why we have to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. NATO air units on high alert after near miss between Russian and Polish aircraft. And this happened, I believe that it all happened on Monday. It was reported on Monday. So NATO has put air units on high alert following a near miss between Russian and Polish aircraft, NATO Reuters reported on Monday. A NATO official said that on Friday, a Polish jet patrolling over the Black Sea near Romania for the EU's border agency known as Frontex had a dangerous encounter with a Russian aircraft. NATO air policing detachments were put on high readiness in the response to the dangerous behavior of the Russian military plane in the vicinity of a Polish Frontex aircraft on the Black Sea near Romania, the NATO official said. The Romanian Defense Ministry accused the Russian aircraft of acting recklessly. This incident is further proof of the provocative approach of the Russian Federation in the Black Sea, the Romanian ministry said in a statement. Since Russia invaded Ukraine last year, there have been several dangerous encounters between Russian and NATO aircraft, including an incident in March that resulted in the downing of a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone near Crimea. According to the New York Times, a leaked Pentagon document revealed a near miss on September 29th that almost resulted in a Russian jet shooting down an unmanned British surveillance plane. U.S. officials said the Russian pilot fired a missile after misinterpreting what a radar operator said, but the missile malfunctioned. And so, again, we are very close to being at direct war between NATO and Russia. And, we have to start really saying that this war has to be brought to an end, or else humanity might be. Next up here, NATO considering upgrade for Ukraine status. And I wrote this along with Will Porter for the Libertarian Institute on May 8th. Estonia plans on pushing the North Atlantic Alliance to present Ukraine with a clear path to full NATO membership at an upcoming meeting, Bloomberg reported, noting that officials will also discuss upgrading Kiev's status within the U.S.-led military bloc. The Estonian foreign minister said Tallinn will raise the issue of membership at the NATO summit in Lithuania scheduled for July, telling Bloomberg, "We must move forward to give a strong message. It's not enough anymore to just repeat the already existing position that Ukraine is welcomed into NATO." Ukraine was first promised NATO membership at a 2008 summit in Bucharest, where another Russian neighbor, Georgia, was also told it could someday join the bloc. However, Moscow reacted sharply to the proposal, fearing Kiev's membership could lead to a large Western military presence on its border. In the 15 years since, NATO has repeatedly stressed that the door remains open for Ukraine, including as recently as last month, but officials have refused to take further steps to grant full membership, even as they admit other countries in Eastern Europe. The Ukrainian ambassador to NATO said the current policy is simply not good enough, stating it's high time to define a clear path to membership for our country. We understand that NATO cannot name the exact date of future membership for Ukraine. However, just another confirmation of the open door policy is not enough anymore. The Estonian foreign minister suggested that short of joining the alliance, Ukraine's official status within NATO could be upgraded, but went on to argue that the opportunity to give real guarantees for Ukraine is after the war, and that's NATO membership. As if Kiev should be given security guarantees in the near term, the Estonian diplomat agreed, but stressed that membership should be the main focus. And so, this is something that hopefully is going to, if it's going to happen, it's going to start getting more attention. But it sounds to me like the NATO alliance is prepared to make a decision in Lithuania during the summit in July that is going to be short of granting Ukraine full membership. It won't be the 31st or 30th country in NATO. are I guess 32nd now. I think there's 31 with Finland, but it could be giving a status by the alliance that would provide Ukraine with security guarantees. That could be a real red line for Russia, and so this could be a major provocation coming this summer. So during a press briefing alongside Ukrainian President Zelensky last month, NATO head Jens Stoltenberg said the country's membership status will be on the table at the upcoming gathering. The Vilnius summit will be important for many reasons. President Zelensky will raise the issue of membership of security guarantees, and this will be high on the agenda of the meeting. He added, declaring, Ukraine's future is in NATO. All allies agree on that. Stoltenberg went on to explain how that Kiev will not receive membership at the upcoming summit, however, saying the alliance would mostly discuss additional military aid to ensure that Ukraine prevails in its war with Russia. So again, they're not going all the way of making Ukraine a member, but it does seem like they're going to do something here. And this is interesting too. The White House refused to say if it will support Ukraine's accession into the alliance at the upcoming summit. Last month, press secretary said that the decision to admit new members is up to NATO and countries aspiring to join, adding that the Biden administration's focus is on supplying Kiev with the weapons it needs to push back against Russian aggression. And this statement's interesting because the U.S. is the main contributor to NATO, but NATO is an alliance where if any country objects to another country joining, it can't join. And so understanding what the White House's position is on Ukraine's membership is very defining for what Ukraine's membership will be. And that the White House is refusing to give an unclear answer at this point is concerning and very striking. It makes me wonder what the White House is actually thinking, if it would not object if the alliance looked to at least upgrade Ukraine's membership, if not, directly add them in. All right, so next up here, let's talk about this counteroffensive. Ukraine's defense minister says lower expectations of the counteroffensive. Senior Ukrainian officials fear that the coming counteroffensive will not live up to expectations of Kiev's Western backers, the Washington Post reported on Saturday. And this is a statement from the Ukrainian defense minister. The expectations from our counteroffensive campaign is overestimated in the world. Most people are waiting for something huge. One of the Pentagon documents that appeared online as opposed to the Discord leads was a U.S. assessment from February that showed the U.S. did not believe Ukraine could regain significant territory. Politico reported on April 24th that the current assessment says something similar. But Western officials are still insisting that Ukraine has what it needs to retake territory from Russia this spring. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said last week that Kiev is capable despite what the Discord leaks revealed. The Ukrainian defense minister said Kiev's Western backers have said they need an example of a success because we need to show it to our people. A Ukrainian failure would not bode well as a rallying cry for more military assistance for Kiev. But I cannot tell you what our scale of success would be. 10 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 100, 200, he asked or said. The Russian Representative Michael McCall, Republican from Texas and the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and staunch supporter of arming Ukraine, has said that the future hinges on the counteroffensive. If Ukraine is successful in the eyes of the American people and the world, I think it will be a game changer for continued support. If they are not, they will also have an impact in a negative way, though. The Ukrainian defense minister said that and Zelensky told the Post that they were preparing for a counteroffensive. Zelensky said they will be ready to launch the assault as soon as the weapons that were agreed with our partners are filled. And this is interesting because I think a U.S. general said that 98% of the weapons they pledged to send are already there. And so I'm not actually sure if Kiev is waiting on weapons. We've heard reports that they're waiting on conditions on the ground. And as I've talked about on the show, maybe a counteroffensive really isn't possible for Kiev to pull off at this point. And that's why we've seen these attacks inside of Russia, Crimea, targeting, people who are supportive of the war, targeting rail lines in Russia, targeting just shelling Russian villages. Maybe this is what Ukraine is doing rather than launching a counteroffensive. Now, we have this build up for months and months and months about this counteroffensive, right? And then we start to hear, it might not go so well, it might not go so well. And then we get a statement saying, well, if it doesn't go well, this could be bad for Ukrainian support. Then we have the Ukrainians coming out and saying, everybody is overestimating what we're able to accomplish. And now we have the US and UK vowing to keep supporting Ukraine regardless of the result of the counteroffensive. And then this is Secretary of State Blinken and his British counterpart, James Cleverly, vowed on Tuesday that the U.S. and Britain will continue supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia, regardless of the results of the counteroffensive. We need to continue to support them, irrespective of what this forthcoming offensive generates. Huge gains on the battlefield. Or not, I guess, because until this conflict is resolved and resolved properly, it is not over, the British foreign minister said at a press conference. Blinken strongly backed the comments, saying, I can violently agree with my friend and strongly endorse what he just said. We have exactly the same perspective. And so this seems to go against a little bit what Representative McCall was saying. At the same time, this is what I kind of assume, that even if this counteroffensive doesn't go well, it's not going to be enough to turn Washington and its allies away from supporting Kiev. Now, this may have an impact on the American people's support for the war and how they feel like our leaders are communicating with us. Because again, they've been building this up for months and months and months. But, is that going to be enough to sway Washington? I'm not quite sure, if we're there yet. I think we need a far bigger, movement against providing arms to Ukraine before our elected leaders will finally join us and realize what's going on here. Now, there's a couple other things going on. Some new weapons packages or new weapon systems potentially heading to Ukraine. And this could be that the West is realizing the counteroffensive may go very poorly and that they're dumping these weapons and kind of at the last minute to try to turn the tables a little bit and give Kiev a little bit more of an edge. So, this from Dave DeCamp. Britain moves closer to sending long-range missiles to Ukraine. Britain appears to be moving closer to sending Ukraine longer-range missiles that the Biden administration has so far refused to provide. Last week, the British Defense Ministry posted a procurement notice with the International Fund for Ukraine, a UK-led group of Northern European countries that coordinate sending arms to Kiev. The notice asks for expression of interest in providing Ukraine with strike capabilities of up to about 190-200 miles. A British official told the Washington Post that no final decision has been made and won't specify on the type of munition London was considering sending. The range matches the UK's Storm Shadow missile, which previous reports have said Britain could provide Ukraine. Now, I believe I wrote up an article about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. There were some comments by the British Prime Minister that showed that London was clearly considering this even back then. So, Storm Shadow missiles are air-launched and can be fired from Ukraine's Soviet-era made fighter jets, and recently, and I have an article about this coming up next, Ukraine should have about 23 MiG-29s from NATO members that were recently transferred, and then these have about the same range as the Army tactical missile systems, the ATACMS, munitions that can be fired from the HIMARS systems, and these are something that Ukraine has been requesting for quite some time. So interesting here that, the British ones will rely on Ukraine having planes, but it does seem that Ukraine will probably have some warplanes for at least the coming weeks. So Poland confirms transfer of warplanes to Ukraine. Warsaw claims it bolstered Kiev's air force by transferring 10 MiG-29 warplanes. Poland was the first NATO member to make the pledge to send Ukraine fighter jets. The Polish defense minister confirmed the weapons transfer had taken place, fulfilling a promise made in March. In April, Slovenia confirmed it sent Ukraine 13 MiG-29. So Poland pledging to send the MiGs prompted Slovenia to follow, and then they actually got the MiGs into Ukraine first. I think the Polish ones needed upgrades or something like that. Ukrainian pilots are familiar with the Soviet-era warplanes. Polish President Duda said Kiev will be able to use the aircraft immediately. The transfer comes ahead of an expected counteroffensive by Ukrainian forces. Recent statements from Washington officials and leaked documents suggest Kiev's counteroffensive may be headed for failure. On Saturday, Ukrainian defense minister said the expectation for a counteroffensive is overestimated in the world. Kiev has been lobbying NATO members to send Western-made fighter jets like the F-16, but so far, President Joe Biden has resisted calls coming from Kiev and Congress to send the advanced aircraft to Ukraine. However, the U.S. and U.K. have begun training Ukrainian pilots on Western-made aircraft. The Polish defense minister said the transfer of the MiG-29s will prod other countries to send Kiev F-16s. We are not trying to put pressure on our allies. We are only trying to encourage them to support Ukraine, he said. So I'm not sure. Again, I think the timetable is still sits 9 months away at the very least for Ukraine getting any Western-made fighter jets. At the same time, they do seem to have these MiGs now, and potentially very soon longer range missiles from the UK to arm them with. And then we have a massive new aid package going to Ukraine. U.S. announces $1.2 billion in long-term military aid for Ukraine. The Biden administration on Tuesday announced the package that includes 105mm artillery ammunition and air defense systems. The massive package is being provided through the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, USAI, which allows the Pentagon to purchase military equipment for Kiev, meaning the arms could take months or years to deliver. The bulk of the U.S. military aid to Ukraine has been provided through the Presidential Drawdown Authority, the PDA, which allows the President Biden to send weapons directly from Pentagon stockpiles. The Pentagon said the announcement represents the beginning of a contracting process to provide additional priority capabilities to Ukraine, and that the weapons package represents the U.S. commitment to supporting Kiev in the long term. This USAI package underscores the U.S. commitment to meeting Ukraine's most urgent requirements by committing clear near-term capabilities such as air defense systems and munitions, while also building capacity of Ukraine's armed forces to defend its territory and deter Russian aggression over the long term, the Pentagon said. The package includes additional air defense systems and munitions, equipment to integrate Western air defense launchers, missiles, and radars within Ukraine's air defense systems, ammunition for counter unmanned aerial systems, 155mm artillery rounds, commercial satellite imagery services, and support for training, maintenance, and sustainment activities. So major escalations going on in the war in Ukraine, but that doesn't mean the U.S. isn't meddling in the Asia Pacific as well. This article, China tells U.S. it must respect red lines to foster communications. Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang and U.S. Ambassador to China Nicholas Burns held talk on Monday as tensions are soaring between the two nations. The meeting came after Burns said Washington was ready to talk with Beijing as communications have broken down after Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled a trip to China over the Chinese balloon that wound up in U.S. airspace. Quinn's message is that in order to foster communications, the U.S. must respect China's position, including its red lines over Taiwan. It's not possible to talk about communications on one hand and keep suppressing and containing China on the other hand, Quinn said, according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry readout. We must respect China's bottom line and red line, and stop undermining China's sovereignty, security, and development interests. In particular, we must correctly handle the Taiwan issue, stop hollowing out the One China principle, and stop supporting and condoning Taiwan independence, separatist forces, the readout said. And so this is what I expected to happen, that China is going to say that talks with the U.S. are only going to come after the U.S. shows that it has some respect for China. And if you've seen anything going on in the U.S. politically and even the discussion around the White House, there is no desire to have any respect for China whatsoever. So I don't necessarily expect this to develop and lead to more positive conversations. However, we will see in the coming weeks if maybe, opening up lines of communication allows for more understanding, and maybe China will be more willing to talk to the U.S. I don't see it at this point. The Biden administration is just so hawkish on all of this. And we have this coming up here. House Republicans demand Europe falls in line on Taiwan. A group of House Republicans introduced a resolution last week that would urge European leaders to affirm support for Taiwan and follow the U.S. policies related to the island. The resolution was introduced by Representative Matt Miller, a Republican from Ohio, and has received 30 Republican co-sponsors, including Representative Mike Gallagher, a Republican from Wisconsin, and chairman of the new House Committee on China. The legislation is a direct response to French President Emmanuel Macron's warning that Europe should not follow the U.S. into a conflict with China over Taiwan. Miller slammed Macron in a statement on the resolution. It is astounding to me that the French president would even suggest that siding with a communist nation over a democratic one. Our resolution asked our European friends one simple question: do you side with Taiwan and democratic values, or with an aggressive communist power that threatens the world order? And this is baffling to me, right? That these people are just rolling out the Cold War playbook, and all these Cold War theories that, we have to, confront every communist nation and support democratic ones. Well, there are things in Taiwan that are anti-democratic. However, China is, far less democrat, but at the same time, we don't need to have this ideological war and replay the Cold War. It simply isn't necessary. The U.S. and Europe can have a manageable relationship with China, and there's no need to provoke this confrontation. But that's kind of the status of things right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And what I'm sure is going to be another major provocation in the eyes of Beijing, the U.S. and the Philippines should start joint patrols in the South China Sea later this year, the Philippines ambassador to the U.S. said on Monday. An estimate would be no later than the third quarter of this year. We should have that in place. The ambassador, Jose Manuel Bodules, said, according to Reuters. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said his Philippines counterpart announced earlier this year that they would begin joint patrols and in the disputed waters, but didn't say when they would start. When asked about the joint patrols, a spokesperson for the U.S. Embassy in the Philippines told Reuters, our conversations on combined maritime activities with the Philippines are continuing, and our military planners are working hard on specific issues like logistics. The U.S. is joining the Philippines in patrols in the South China Sea will likely lead to dangerous confrontations between American and Chinese vessels, as the Philippines and China often has standoffs near disputed reefs. The most recent incident took place in April when a Chinese vessel blocked a Philippines boat near the Second Thomas Shoal, which was controlled by the Philippines but also claimed by China, Taiwan, and Vietnam. The Philippines ambassador comments come after the U.S. and the Philippines issued guidelines for the 1951 U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty. The guidelines make it official that the U.S. is committed to intervene if a Philippines vessel comes under attack in the South China Sea, even in disputed waters. All right, last article here today. Biden to become first president to visit Papua New Guinea. The White House announced on Tuesday that President Biden will become the first sitting president to visit Papua New Guinea as the U.S. is looking to boost cooperation with the Pacific nation as a part of its strategy against China. The White House said Biden will stop in Papua New Guinea after the G7 summit of leaders in Hiroshima, Japan, which will also be held from May 19th through the 21st. After Papua New Guinea, Biden will head to Sydney, Australia for a summit of Quad leaders. The U.S. and Papua New Guinea have been in talks on reaching a deal to boost military ties, known as the Defense Cooperation Agreement. Papua New Guinea officials have said that a potential deal could allow U.S. training and would focus on building up the Pacific Islands and military. So I got a map up here for anybody who's not familiar of where this is. North of Australia, I think it splits the island that it's on with Indonesia. So the deal with Papua New Guinea is seen as a U.S. response to China signing a security agreement with the nearby Solomon Islands. While Papua New Guinea, Biden will meet with the prime minister, who previously said he doesn't want his country getting caught in the middle between the U.S. and China, although this seems that this visit is probably the first step to getting caught in the middle of something. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. I'll be back with one more show later in the week. And yeah, keep on tuning in. Thank you.